my niece's name is Ruby. No. I call her Ruby Monday. Not to be confused with Ruby Tuesday.
No. Of course not.
Yeah, it's to prevent confusion, really.
Well, Jake, I feel like I'm a bit tense. I'm going to undo my top button, Jake. You ready?
Do it slowly.
Here we go. It's a little more relaxed now.
Well, it hasn't really separated.
A little more relaxed. Well, it's being held together by chest hair.
The old chest hair trick.
Well, welcome, Jake. It's lovely to see you. We missed out yesterday. It was my fault. I'm more than happy to take.
I refuse to let you take blame for that.
I'm more than happy to take 4,000,000% of the blame, given that I was in the Hunter Valley and did spend a vast majority of my weekend drinking wine from the Hunter Valley. Yeah. I had to do it for the economy, Jake. I had to do it for the tourism. I had to do it for the
little people.
For the little people, for the little folk who run wineries in the Hunter Valley,
Yeah, they're all very little, aren't they?
The small fry.
Yeah. Mind you, the Hunter Valley region is acknowledged as one of the big fries in the country.
It was so beautiful out there. I was so happy to be out there. It was just such a great experience. It was my first time there, and I just loved it. So shout out to Sadler's Creek Wines, who looked after us for the day, and also we went to Broken Wood Winery as well. Have you ever been to the Hunter?
As a reasonably small child, I think. I was born in New South Wales, and I spent my first 12 years in New South Wales. And yes, I recall several family trips to the Hunter and to other regions. But
your parents don't, but you would.
Exactly. Yep. I recall how it's done there in the Hunter. But yeah, no, I it's been a while. It has been a reasonable amount of time since.
Yeah, well, you live in one country up there, don't you? You live in Mount Tamborine anyway. So
I do.
Who cares? Who cares about the Hunter Valley?
We don't. We're not renowned. The Tamborine is not renowned for its great wines.
More jelly.
Or jelly.
More of a jelly.
Right. We're known for liqueurs. Liqueurs are good.
Yeah.
Look, we've got a few wine areas. We've got plenty of wineries. But yeah, it's not really known for its exceptional wines.
All right. Well, you okay? So aside from the wines, you guys are getting prepped for your big election up there, Jake. What are the big? Aside from better wineries, better wine, what are the big ticket items? What's the feeling in the wind up there, Jake?
Look, a lot of it is
tropical wind.
A lot of it is, and even the subtropical and the non-tropical.
The hot wind and the less hot wind.
Exactly. Well, is it desert hot or is it off the ocean hot? That's the question. That's the question on everybody's lips, and that's really actually the big ticket item. Is it hot here or is it really hot here? It's really about the economy. It's about opening things up. It's about unemployment, which is a massive thing around Queensland as it is around the rest of Australia. And probably the rest of the world at the moment. But it is really those same hot topics as elsewhere. We have the expansion of, the opening up of the Adani mine, which was, a massive,
everyone loves that.
Massive thing not so long ago, which has been recently approved. We've potentially got another mine around the Darling Downs as well that was recently postponed, decision on that one. So, it's the same old story in Queensland. You can't tell from one region to the next what the next region actually thinks are the hot ticket items.
Who's your money on?
I don't know.
Dan Andrews?
Yes. No, look, I think, and at least what the commentators are saying is that I just don't want to jinx myself. Greg, that's the big thing.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. Okay,
in the grand scheme of things, the huge number of the commentators are saying that Anastasia Palaszczuk is likely to return with a majority government. But look, polls have been wrong, can be wrong, and it's just gonna be hugely interesting.
Yes, I heard this morning someone on the news commenting on the fact that we live in a post-polling world. We live in a world where polls really don't matter. Not worthy of backstabs or anything like that. Now, speaking of bringing the Queensland economy back in, Jake. It's all about tourism for you guys
It really
up there.
is.
And we've got some New Zealanders coming in. I'm not sure that you guys actually get access to the New Zealanders, but we had some exciting news. I remember feeling excited about the first flight from Sydney to South Australia over the last few months, and I think Tasmania is opening up. But this was a huge week for New Zealanders coming here, Jake.
It really has. It would be remiss of me, Greg, to just acknowledge the fact that we haven't really done an intro yet, and just wonder, do we want to do an intro before
smintro, Jake. Intro smintro. You know, people know you. There's two types of people, Jake. Those who know the pouch and those who don't matter. So,
so new listeners. Whatever.
Yeah. You'll catch up.
Yeah,
you'll catch up. Go and listen to an intro to another episode.
Then just apply it to this one. Different news stories, but it's all good. No, you're definitely right. No, we're
going to do the intro.
Okay, all right. We are. Okay. I am a man of convention, Greg.
Oh, look, I was just stoked that I remembered how to do segues, I think. My brain was all over it. Hello, and welcome to The Pouch, the podcast equivalent of a chook pen destroyed in a cyclone that takes a not-so-serious look at the week in Australian news and politics. I'm Greg. I watch so much news that I'm pretty sure my new puppy thinks Josh Frydenberg is his real father, Savage.
And I'm Jake. It really upsets me when adults refer to their pets as their kids, Farr-Wartom. On today's episode, we talk ructions in New South Wales, tensions in Victoria, and issues on the Senate floor, and so very much more.
Yes. And Jake, while we're as snug as a bug in this proverbial rug, I want to know why the news has me convinced that the Senate estimates are such a big deal.
I was estimating you were going to say that. I mean, spoiler alert, I was estimating you were going to say that.
Very good. Now, Jake, speaking of the Queensland economy, it's all about tourism for you guys.
Oh, that was a flashy segue.
Oh dear,
that had some meat behind it.
It's all about look at now also celebrating 102 days of lockdown in Victoria. I've actually got a hairdressing salon as my background for those watching the video podcast. So that was the best thing I could find for a hairdressing salon background. That wasn't going to get me sued. So that's there it is. I think if I lean back, there is someone. Ooh, goodness. There is someone getting their hair cut in the background there. But anyway, so it is all about the setting the getting the tourism back over there. And we did have a flight from New Zealand arrive this week, which is super exciting. We know that Jacinda Ardern has basically cleaned up over there in New Zealand. She's got a vast majority.
Yes.
In government. She said that she was going to leave if she lost.
Yep. Yeah, it was an interesting one. A really fraught election season. The thing that I think I was most enamored by, I think is the correct term, is the debate that they had where both leaders clearly respected each other, did not speak over the top of each other, except to put in a pun that they both laughed at. And it was just honestly the most delightful political debate that was on actual political issues. Oh my gosh.
I think that's the thing, right? Like, it's such a clear contrast, and I know we're getting out of our lane here a little bit.
I'm referring also to the Australian ones that we have. They're not. Anyway, it was just delightful.
It is, though, isn't it? It's such a contrast between watching the debates over in the US and the debates in New Zealand, and sort of, seeing Jacinda Ardern get voted in with a vast majority based on her convictions about coronavirus and her commitment to making sure that very few people died. Okay, but anyway, they can come and visit us now, Jake. So tell us a little bit about this, a little bit of a warm-up before we jump into the shallow waves. What's happening with the travel bubble, the Trans-Tasman travel bubble?
Around 300 New Zealanders have arrived into Australia's so-called travel bubble, as you say, which is just so, I got to say, it is so much fun to say the term travel bubble.
It is. Trans-Tasman travel bubble is a super fun one to say.
You made it even more fun. So yes, there's a bunch of them on a flight or on a couple of flights. Around 90% of those on flights have a one-way ticket as well. So they're taking Scott Morrison's suggestion, or rather, actually, it was Michael McCormack that said you can come here, you can visit our great country, spend a bit of your money, and if you like, you can find a bit of love here too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it was delightful. So there were a couple of states that were one state and one territory that was opened up to the Kiwis. There was Northern Territory and New South Wales. I have been. I've been reading quite a lot today, suggesting that there were some issues.
Yeah,
essentially around people who hopped on the plane to Australia and then hopped on another plane domestically to go to a state that they weren't allowed to go to, not necessarily they weren't. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, at least 90 New Zealand travellers have flown to Victoria, Western Australia, and Tasmania after arriving in Sydney, despite only New South Wales and the Northern Territory agreeing to the Trans-Tasman bubble. There was widespread confusion on Sunday as Premier Daniel Andrews revealed previous estimates of 17 New Zealanders arriving in Victoria had jumped to 55 as state and federal leaders accused each other of responsibility for their bungle. Now, if there's one thing that Daniel Andrews doesn't like, New Zealanders, it's rising numbers. Yeah, he doesn't like that. That was from SBS News.
In the double digits.
Yeah, that's from SBS News, but that is hilarious.
It was a bit interesting. I mean, the whole premise of this was that they were able to come into the state without having to quarantine. And the fact of the matter is, by going to these other states, they are going to have to quarantine on their own purse.
So is that their consequence? They just quarantine?
Well, that's part of the consequence. The other side of this is that, essentially those, when you apply to come to your home state, so when you apply to come to your home state, particularly from overseas, you have to apply and you have to have, hotel quarantine placements organised for you. And none of these placements were organised for these individuals who have to quarantine because they are going into a state that has not enabled that zero quarantine stay.
Okay.
So,
and an issue that arises from that, of course, is that we've got a limited number of quarantine places, and we're already bringing Australians back home, and we already struggle to bring all the Australians back home who need to come back home.
Essentially, it is creating tensions with those people who were essentially waiting for seats or, if you like, beds in the hotel quarantine program that they could come home to. So, look, there were a couple of people accused of essentially queue jumping this week, which is a little bit unfortunate because we do want people to come and visit and spend their cash here. We got a strapped economy, so it'd be great if we could make it as safe as humanly possible and at the same time as accommodating as humanly possible. There has to be a balance here, I'm sure. But
absolutely,
Victoria.
Absolutely. All right. Speaking of balance, Jake, I like to walk, and when I like to walk,
this is a great segue. Loved it.
This is a good one, isn't it? When I walk, I like to keep balanced. Yeah. And nothing keeps me more balanced than my RM's Williams, Jakes, except I had to get rid of my RM Williams because they weren't Australian owned. They were owned by like Gucci or someone, Louis Vuitton.
Yes, Louis Vuitton. Yeah. Well, not necessarily Louis Vuitton, but it's a Louis Vuitton backed private equity firm.
Oh, well, I mean, that's what,
known
that's
as
just your opinion.
Patterson.
Okay, well, they're back. They're back. Yes. They're back in Australian hands, Jake. They're the Holden of shoes.
Well, I mean, Holden was always owned by GM, and GM is not an Australian brand. But in this case, the iconic...
the Vegemite of shoes.
Kraft. Is Kraft Australian? Kraft is Australian. I don't know.
They're the John Howard of shoes.
There we go. We got that. Actually, John Winston Howard was born in. No, I'm just kidding. No, so yes, an investment company owned by the mining magnate Andrew Twiggy Forrest and his wife Nicola have bought the Australian bootmaker RM Williams back to Australia, returning it to Australian ownership after I think it was around a decade, or at least half a decade, or at least part of a decade. Yes, the Adelaide. the Adelaide-based outfitter founded by Bushman Reginald Murray Williams, or R.M. Williams, in 1932, has been in the hands of, as you said, Louis Vuitton-backed private equity firm L. Catterton for a few years. And it employs, almost 1,000 people across Australia, both in the factories themselves, in the warehouses, and there's a bunch of retail and wholesale stores. So it's it's good news for all of those who like really expensive boots to be made in Australia.
Well, look, from all reports, the boots are quite nice. I went into an R.M. Williams.
I have RMs. I have my RMs.
Yeah, I went into R.M. Williams and I made the mistake of saying that I thought that they were a little feminine. Now that didn't go well. That didn't go down well.
Look,
and I think the sales lady's eyes politely told me to leave the shop. But I just thought without the laces, I thought they looked a bit feminine. That was all.
I have a slight brush with fame, and I would say I completely agree with you. They are a little bit, but they're riding boots, they're working boots.
Yeah, you don't want laces getting in the way of your horse riding.
Have a bit of style. Well, not just that, they'd come undone while you're in the saddle. And have you ever tried to tie up laces while you're sitting on a saddle?
I have. I'm very good at it.
Did you find it extremely
4 skills, and that's one of them.
To the point where you accidentally fell off because you lost your balance? Because I know I have. Interestingly enough, my wife and I were down in Melbourne one time. We went into the R.M. Williams store, and we ran into Geoffrey Rush, none other than iconic Australian actor Geoffrey Rush. It was quite interesting. My wife went up and said, "Oh, Mr. Rush, I really admire your films and think you're great." And I said, "I particularly love the piano. You just played such an amazing part. You seem to have captured the interesting spirit of that individual." And my wife said, "Would you mind if we got a selfie with you?" To which I looked and I said, "This guy is renowned for not allowing selfies. He is renowned for not doing that sort of thing." To which he responded, "No, I don't do those sorts of things."
More than reasonable. Look, I think we've all got an R.M. Williams shop story then, Jake. So email them in.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yep. Gotcha.
Email them in to thepouchthepodcast@gmail.com. We want to hear your R.M. Williams shop stories.
Yeah.
All right, now let's get into some nitty gritty of this, Jake. This was a big week for copying and pasting some news stories over to our script. Now we're going to get to Gladys Berejiklian and the ICAC and Daryl Maguire and that situation soon. But first, I want to do a story that's sort of before the Gladys situation and before New Zealanders started invading us and spreading corona over here. I made sure that we got this story down. Now this was Victoria's top public servant Chris Eccles resigned. This was a little bit ago. He's the most senior Victorian public servant at the head of Premier Daniel's department, and he resigned after being asked to hand over his phone records to the state's hotel quarantine inquiry. Why, Jake? Why did he resign? Why did they want his phone?
Well, they wanted to corroborate his account, the account that he gave at the inquiry into the hotel quarantine debacle. Essentially, he'd made a claim that he hadn't had conversations with certain people, the then police chief commissioner, Graham Ashton, and it seems that he, in fact, did. And it also seems, and I mean, that all centered around the premise of who are we going to get to essentially staff hotel quarantine. Are we going to get these, Are we going to get these spotless security guards, or are we going to get our own police and staff them with health staff and other people? And it seems that the conversation that did not happen actually did happen, and it seems that the conversation that definitely didn't happen, according to Chris Eccles, his testimony at the inquiry, did actually in fact happen. So he was found to have either misled or misremembered or just forgotten. And as a consequence, he tendered his resignation immediately. To which Dan Andrews accepted it. Was apparently quite shocked as well. You do have to sort of take these happenings with a bit of a grain of salt, because it's when it's a story that's been given and it contradicts another story, you got to wonder, well, who's been asked to fall on their sword?
Yeah, it's certainly it's a big coincidence, isn't it, that he sort of misremembered making these phone calls and said that it didn't really happen. They did happen. Then I think it was some hours later or some minutes later, the actual formal decision was made to not use Australian Defence Force, but to use private security.
Yeah.
So, a few coincidences not falling in the right place there for Mr. Eccles, but yes, I can imagine. So that's two heads that have rolled now, isn't it?
Jenny McCarkos, the health minister, and yes, now Chris Eccles. And the really big thing here is that this guy, unless there is another account. And that other, the other account of things, and that other account of things happens to come in the form of a job reference letter, this guy's done. This guy's a career public servant. It's possible that he could get a role in a consulting firm that specializes on essentially public sector interactions or liaisons. But this is going to be really difficult for this dude.
Trade minister. It would definitely become trade envoy. What is it? Trade envoy.
Trade envoy. Send him to the UK.
Yeah. All right. Now this. This sort of got a little bit. If you want to touch on anything else on that one.
No, look, it's just really unfortunate. And I say really unfortunate, not from the perspective of, look, it's just unfortunate that this seems to be claiming everyone's scalp, but potentially the person who said, I am chiefly responsible for all of this stuff, which is Daniel Andrews.
Yeah.
And I'm not claiming that he is responsible. I'm just saying that there seem to be a lot of really highly placed individuals at the top that are going, and yet the person who leads them all has not been asked to essentially, account for what he was responsible for.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and but under no circumstance are they going to get rid of him, given that the numbers are dropping so fast, and that he's basically the face not only of the failures but also of the successes, and the successes are just wildly outweighing those negative, the negative sort of stories that are coming out at the moment, I guess. So.
I just wish that everyone would provide and I mean this as a private citizen, not as someone who talks about, not as a private citizen who talks about this kind of stuff, but I just wish that they would all tell the truth from the begining. It would just make things, at a time in our world, at a time when we are. All suffering from a lack of trust in our public officials, and statistically, it is at a all-time low. And I should say that those statistics were pre-COVID, so have probably improved. But those feelings of lack of trust were all around obfuscation, not telling the truth, or a perception that the questions are being obfuscated, or that politicians aren't telling the truth. And if they don't sort this stuff out and tell the truth to the public, it's only going to get worse from here.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's use that as a bit of a segue into the next story, because the next story is huge, and so I've got to tread lightly here as well. I have to say that these are any opinions of my own and not that of my employer, who may or may not be Gladys Berejiklian. Anyway, so we've got to be a little bit careful here. But so you might find that you've got some stronger opinions than what we have here. But we'll try and stick to a few facts here. Now, this sort of came as a bit of a surprise to everyone. So this is the story of the ICAC, and we've got a question here, which is, will ICAC unseat another premier? I doubt very much that it will. It looks to me like she's sort of sticking it out at the moment. She's still copping a little bit of negative flack in the press, but for the most part, the Murdoch press is certainly doing a great job of just sort of, not playing, being impartial, right, and not playing up to it too much. So there's still certainly the sense that she can survive this. I think that my own opinion would be that she's, hoping that probably a US election and maybe a few other news stories might get this one a bit buried, and we can concentrate on the fact that we got 0 cases today here in New South Wales.
Yeah.
So backtracking a little bit, she did reveal, and my understanding is she didn't actually lie about this. She did just reveal in her ICAC, what do you call it, testimony,
Yep.
that she was having a long-term relationship with Daryl Maguire, who is under investigation for corruption.
Yep.
So he's a former Wagga Wagga MP. They were dating since, have a personal relationship since 2015. He may have recently given some information which indicates that it's as early as 2013. But Gladys has sort of downplayed it a little bit, that it was a relationship, but maybe not a formal relationship, that she was somewhat into him. When the ICAC tapes were played and he mentioned that he was probably doing something a bit shady, she is on record as saying in the phone call, I don't need to know about that. I don't need to know about that. She says that she was just bored and she just wanted to move on. So tell us a little bit of background, Jake. Tell us a little bit about what happened during that time.
Well, I think you set up the premise rather nicely. The whole thing here is that Gladys Berejiklian, the Premier of New South Wales, has always been a very private individual, and just prior to the appearance at the ICAC this weekend. Last week, pardon me, just prior to the ICAC hearing of Daryl Maguire into these allegations of forms of corruption, she announced that she had a relationship with Mr. Maguire. And so the timing was quite clear. She was trying to suggest that, yes, absolutely, there was a relationship, but that relationship had nothing to do with whatever comes out in terms of the former MP, Daryl Maguire, his testimony. So in terms of what Maguire has been alleged to have done, he admitted to accepting cash deliveries to his parliamentary office relating to a visa scheme for Chinese nationals that he contributed to, and he had been assisting in terms of getting access to politicians for developments that he was party to, or at least going to directly benefit from, and that was very unfortunate. But yes, the former partner of the New South Wales Premier made a series of stunning admissions in front of the ICAC, or the Independent Commission Against Corruption, agreeing that he ran a private business from his parliamentary office, concealed his involvement from those firms, and promised his clients access to high levels of government. Interesting.
He was acting as a gatekeeper, wasn't he?
Well, a facilitator, essentially a facilitator for access. It was, some of the testimony was, quite jarring, because you imagine that as a private citizen, hi, I'm John Q. Citizen over here, and I would like to think that I have just as much access as any other human being in my state to our politicians. And similarly for federal, just as much access as any other person in Australia. So the fact that a politician might want to do some business for his mates and get that mate access to the Premier or to a politician in order to have their questions answered, or in order to have their business improved, it runs in the face of representative democracy. And it's really unfortunate. So some of the just delightfully awful testimony that was given. So I'll read some of this verbatim. Quizzing Mr. Maguire over his association with one of the companies that he was director of, which is called Gateway International. The counsel assisting the inquiry, Scott Robertson, asked, quote, "Do you agree that on more than one occasion you received deliveries in your Parliament House office of thousands of dollars in cash associated with a scheme involving the obtaining of Australian visas for Chinese nationals?" Mr. Maguire paused and then said, "Yes." Quote, "Hands down, this has been one of the most difficult..." I'm sorry, I read ahead too far. Now, the revelations around the relationship with Premier Berejiklian has been. I got to say, just as an outside observer, it's been really hard to watch, because not only has she just found out that her, former, I hate using the term lover, but they haven't admitted necessarily to being partners, so I don't really have a term to express that. But essentially, to see her raked over the coals for what amounted to a, some form of deceitful relationship, at least he concealed corruption from her. That's what it seems. And to see her, I suppose, heartbroken in public over this and dragged over the coals because of that relationship is really unfortunate. To your earlier question around whether she can survive this, there doesn't seem to be anything that she has said or that he has said that would directly implicate her in any of his corruption or alleged corruption. So it seems that unless something pops up in terms of MPs wanting to roll her over in favor of someone else, then it is totally unlikely that she would that she would go. And moreover, this is the Premier who, she's an incredibly strong, articulate, powerful woman. Only a couple of weeks ago, she stared down John Barilaro and the Nationals over their desire to
called their bluff.
Yeah, exactly. Called their bluff. So she, hands down, this has been an awful scenario for any individual to go through, let alone somebody who has, essentially steered her ship, steered her state through just treacherous waters of the treacherous waters that are COVID.
Yeah, I think I can see the other side of it too. I think I can definitely see the side that says, well, actually with, what was it, the Ruby Princess, there's a few bungles there. There's sort of, she's a bit harsh, all that sort of stuff. I can sort of see why people might be of the ilk that she's not maybe this amazing navigator through coronavirus land as what we think. I also just sort of over time have developed this opinion about politicians in the sense that, well, you know what, to get to where they need to get to, you can't all be as nice and as chirpy and as friendly as Jacinda Ardern. I think you have to have this sort of a part of you which is a little bit not usually socially acceptable. And I think it's just sort of a matter of time before those sorts of personality traits come out. If you either get lucky and they don't, or you get unlucky and they do. And I think that this is just Gladys's turn to sort of have that part of her personality come out. I just don't think you can be the leader that a state needs you to be, or to get to that sort of that ranking in one of the major political parties without having some sort of personality trait which other people might not sit well with. And for the most part, that's disguised through television, through media appearances, through interviews, through Women's Weekly shoots, whatever it is. They're disguised. Those personality traits are disguised, and coronavirus can disguise them in the sense that if your state's doing really well and you still have these personality traits, well, that's okay because you got your state through the coronavirus situation. So I can sort of see why people might be a little bit skeptical in the sense that, well, let's not give her too much of the benefit of the doubt. I can see both sides. I certainly know from speaking to people, out in the field, from speaking to people at work, and just in general conversation, that they certainly have that attitude that Gladys should just be left alone. It was a private relationship. She sort of got dragged under the bus because of her private relationship with Daryl, and that she shouldn't be thrown in that same basket as him when it comes to this sort of stuff. However, maybe there's a bit more to it than what we'll know, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. But Gladys wouldn't be Gladys if she didn't have those experiences. So,
I also think it's a bit lonely at the top, For some politicians, they find time, like famously Bob Hawke spent plenty of time in pubs drinking with his constituents. But not all leaders have that same sociability, that populism bent about them, and I think for certain leaders who, by all rights, and I acknowledge everything that you've said about, Ruby Princess and others, but who are invariably reasonably effective, and I would probably suggest that, based on the record of the last, almost year that we've been doing this podcast, she has seemed to be one of the more effective premiers. It is fair to surmise, I think, that it is a bit lonely at the top, and to form a relationship with someone who invariably you're going to be forced into close quarters with, it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that there's an argument to be made as well that maybe she should have, that maybe there should have been more done in terms of making sure that, reporting sort of what she knew he was up to and all that sort of stuff.
If she knew, I suppose.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And I take your point, because it's possible that she did know and that she's concealing that, plausible deniability. But you invariably, unless she comes clean and says, yes, I did know and I didn't report.
Yeah.
At which point, probably her media advisor would suggest that she take a different stance and say, look, I'm sorry, I was blinded by love.
Yeah, well, that's right. Who knows what actually went on? I suppose that's the thing, and we do have some people out there who are very strongly. I know that Friendly Geordies is particularly vocal at the moment in his regard for Gladys. He's got a Twitter thing going for hashtag guilty Gladys, basically suggesting that she should have reported it to ICAC, and that the fact that she didn't, and that the fact that there's other politicians who have reported things to ICAC and have actually been totally shunned by their own parties based on their their convictions that they should report something, that something seems a little bit iffy, So anyway, there are a couple of sides to this. It's not all friendly and loving for poor old Gladys. But having said that, I think the vast majority of her party, the vast majority of the public, I think given those two sections of our society, and the fact that they will support her, I think will keep her.
She has a huge amount of support in the party.
Yeah.
In fact, a number of the more senior ministers last week came out and said, she remains our guy. She remains our premier. She does not need to resign.
All right. Okay. Now, speaking of influence, in terms of media, Jake, Kevin Rudd, the newly bearded Kevin Rudd.
Gosh, he looks good with a beard.
He does look good with a beard. He's planning a petition to investigate Murdoch and to investigate the Murdoch's influence in Australia. I didn't think Murdoch had too much influence here in Australia.
Oh, just all newspapers. And few
yes, but
holdings.
It's worked in Gladys's favour, Jack, so that's okay.
Yeah, but it hasn't worked. When Rudd was in power, and all of this is around essentially the former PM has set up a petition calling for a royal commission into influence caused by Rupert Murdoch's News Corp. And essentially it's taken down the Australian parliamentary website where these petitions are held. But Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, or former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, was at the helm when it came up to an election, and a bunch of the Murdoch newspapers were told to run a particular story. I think the Australian's front page was "Kick this mob out."
Yes,
and there were a number of other ones, and it's happened in other state-based mastheads as well, where essentially the News Corp or Murdoch directly have taken a particular political bent, and which they've essentially always had, but they've taken a more interventionist route and have decided to get on the side of one campaign or the other. Famously, interestingly enough, it wasn't always so bad when Murdoch was essentially back in the days of Gough Whitlam, early days of Gough Whitlam. Whitlam met with Murdoch a couple of times and had the opportunity to essentially bring Murdoch on side as part of the marketing arm of the Labor Party at the time. So.
Yeah.
But essentially, that didn't work out.
No.
It's been rather opposite.
Yeah,
pretty
look,
well
I
ever
think
since.
yeah, it's certainly an interesting crossover in the sense that where people are getting their media from now and what people are thinking about, and there are some different opinions that you can get, but obviously they still have that reach. I haven't watched any of the documentaries that have been released recently. I know that there's been a
they were fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
I should really get around to watching them. What did you think?
Oh, look, it reinforces the fact, like he is a he's a wealthy and powerful man for a reason.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. I don't know that I can't exactly recall whether he is a self-made, billionaire, i.e., whether he started off with an inheritance or not. I can't
started running off the
Innisfail
Advocate or something, and then
well, essentially, he had a small. He did. He inherited a newspaper empire.
Yeah, right.
And the board of directors, split it apart, and he then started essentially a campaign to get revenge and gain back that monopoly that he previously held, or his family previously held, and he did achieve that and a heck of a lot more, because he pretty well now owns most of the Australian state-based and indeed national newspapers, and there aren't really too many other players in the market anymore. It absolutely fascinating. A family doesn't, plays some part in his in his motivations, but mainly it's about power and influence. So fascinating thing.
Look, it's just, I wish I had that sort of motivation in me, Jake. I wish I could relate to that sort of emotion, I suppose, that sort of commitment to it. It's been a fascinating ride throughout my time anyway, to sort of watch the influence grow and to see the fact that newspapers are going down, and that, what sort of influence are they going to have now, and see the rise of a Facebook influence or a Twitter influence, or, and watching them sort of censor things now too, that's an interesting little journey to go on. Yeah.
I think of the last sort of decade or two, it's been most interesting to see, sort of this chicken and egg thing play out. What I mean by that is, what do people come to newspaper, particularly newspaper mastheads for? They come there for journalism, right?
Yeah.
And as the rise of internet, the technology giants, et cetera, that, share newspapers and share aggregators and blogs that, copy and paste with a slight reword, et cetera. As they have sort of risen, the amount of advertising dollars from the newspapers have shrunk, and as a weird consequence, newspapers have essentially reduce the amount of journalism and increase the amount of editorialism that has occurred.
Listicles.
And as a consequence, people are going away from those major news mastheads. Like I can't subscribe to the major news companies in Australia because I cannot stand partisanship. If I pick up a Murdoch paper and I see a particularly partisan right wing story, or I pick up the Guardian and I see a particularly partisan left wing story, it just doesn't appeal to me whatsoever. I much prefer actual journalism.
Facts.
Don't give me the editorial. Don't give me the spin. I want to read the facts.
I think that's part of it too. Like, my journey with journalism has been a little bit like that, in the sense that I've sort of now, I think I've mentioned it on the show a couple of times, that I just now sort of accept that every media outlet has some kind of bent, right? That they have some kind of motivation and agenda. Yeah, you're right. So, it's just a matter of figuring out that agenda, and a matter of going, okay, well, how do I navigate that? Because you like having the information, and it is information, it's just a matter of going, okay, how do I, as a responsible, educated individual, how do I navigate that, myself and try and make some informed decisions.
Exactly. So just getting back to this story that we started away about an hour ago.
Hang on, I'll just delete 20 minutes. Got it. Yeah.
So essentially, what has happened here is that the former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd has set up this petition to investigate the Murdoch the Murdoch newspapers in Australia, and the Australian parliamentary website on which that petition has been hosted essentially was inundated by people. At the time of the news article that we pilfered from gizmodo.com.au, there was around 89,000 signatures, but the influx of signatures and of course federal government websites have recently not had a great run with being able to bring in lots and lots of people to their website. So obviously we had the census fail of I think it was 2016. We just recently, just this year, we had the failure of the ability to log on to, I think it was MyGov, in order to get information about the job keeper programs, etc., job seeker programs. This one unfortunately dropped down. So it'll be really interesting to see. There's a new disclaimer on the Australian parliamentary website that states, quote, "We are aware some users are currently experiencing issues signing petitions. We are working on a resolution. If you're unable to sign, please try again later."
Yeah, it's a bit of the anti-influence, isn't it? There's certainly a lot of influence from Murdoch, but there's certainly a very strong undercurrent of anti-influence that people just want to stop that right-wing bias in the media.
And I should say as well, former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has gotten behind the premise of a royal commission into this influence. Well, but it does make a lot of sense. He's made a lot of allegations, particularly in his most recent autobiography, where essentially he was saying that the Murdoch players wanted to kick him out and have him tank the last the election that was forthcoming in order to over time get Tony Abbott back into power. Tony Abbott was by all rights very favourable towards the Murdoch press. So well,
that worked out well.
It did. Yeah, super well.
Worked out well.
Thanks, Scotty.
All right, Fred Stokes has been leaving a few messages. He does say that paywalls create an interesting issue as well. Now that clickbait headlines are so common, it's impossible to check the actual story. Yeah, if you're not willing to pay for your news, it can be tricky to get those different points of view. We're lucky in Australia, I guess, to have ABC and SBS, which will give you full stories for free. And I think, Jake, you and I both subscribe to Apple News. I give them, I think it's $15 a month. You get behind a few paywalls that way, which is quite nice as well. You don't get behind all of them, but to be able to click on news stories and just be able to get that news is pretty good too. I think Apple News might actually be a bit leaning towards the Murdoch side of the subscription side of things, but yeah, you can get access to magazines.
They do, but I think that's really just a matter of who has subscribed.
That's
which
right.
Newspapers have subscribed to it.
Yeah. But anyway, there are little ways around it, and maybe you choose a news. I think I subscribe. Well, I know that I subscribe to the Guardian weekly as well, which is a fascinating read. So sometimes giving your money to the news articles and the news organisations can feel good, and you feel like you're getting a bit more information as well. All right, now Jake, are we skipping down to story 5?
I think so.
All right, so this is a reasonably racist Conservative Tasmania Senator Eric Abetz has refused to apologise after he caused a storm of outrage by demanding 3 Chinese Australians publicly and unconditionally condemn the Chinese Communist Party dictatorship. Give us the deets, Jake.
Well, those are the deets, essentially.
That's excellent. Let's wrap it up.
I don't know that it is. I don't know that it's necessarily racist, but it is. It is a really interesting show of ethnocentrism and various other terms. I'd say. So essentially what he did was this is such an interesting thing, right? Because it's during a Senate hearing into the issues affecting diaspora communities. So a diaspora community is essentially, in this specific example, it's Chinese, people who have come to another country, creating a diaspora or a great, leaving of a great number of people who essentially form their own communities, with their own cultures and their own belief systems and et cetera, in the new country. So that's referred to as a diaspora. So in a Senate hearing into these issues affecting diaspora communities in Australia, and they're hearing evidence from individual. Pardon me. I wish I had a mute button that didn't create its own sound. But in this Senate hearing, right, about these diaspora communities, they're hearing evidence about, for example, this one witness, Yun Jiang, who's a former China analyst who previously worked for the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. And he's talking about how he, as a Chinese citizen, or as a former Chinese citizen, he has certain fears about potential political retribution against family members that still live in that country. He's talking about the challenges that they face in terms of just in general institutionalized racism in the country that he has adopted as his own country. And he's asked this direct question by Senator Eric Abetz, quote, "Can I ask each of the three witnesses to briefly tell me whether they are willing to unconditionally condemn the Chinese Communist Party dictatorship?" It's not a difficult question, he said.
That sounds pretty difficult.
Of course. I mean, it's such a leading question. It's such a silly, pointless question. But moreover, this gentleman, Yung Jiang, who had just finished saying, quote, "The grievous human rights abuses done by the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party." She's talking about, the fact that she has fear of the government, of the Communist Party. She's talking about how, they commit, awful acts.
Yeah.
And he is bullying her into making a statement to condemn this party that she's just said she invariably fears a little bit. And many political commentators were talking about how much this stinks of McCarthyism, which you may know as like he was the former Joe McCarthy, the former U.S. president, who was during the Red Scare. He was trying to weed out communists,
right?
And they had to ask all sorts of questions. Do you condemn communism?
Right.
And if not, or something similar. So it's
okay. So there's some ilk of that here. It's a bit of a the dog whistling situation.
It really is, and for their part, essentially, one of the respondents said, "quote, I don't support the Communist Party, but I don't believe that it's helpful to get into a political game of denouncements."
No.
To which Abetz said it was a limp statement.
Yes, right. Okay, limp statement. All right, so that's the new one. We'll write that down. Limp statement. Yep, got it.
Anyway, look, it's unfortunate that people like Senator Abetz are doing this in our name. I'm not okay with it.
No. And hopefully the people speak, Jake, at the next election. Hopefully he'll have a limp outcome.
He's a senator. He's got 6 years. Got another 3 or 4 years to go, I'm sure.
Well, it doesn't do their party well sometimes to have those sorts of comments flouting about.
True.
Now, Jake, just quickly, ACT election.
Yes, congratulations
it's all
to the
happening.
Labour Party returned for another decade.
ALP at the current, there's 2 seats in doubt. ALP have 10 seats, Liberal have 8. This was updated 2 minutes ago. 82.2% of the vote counted. Other is 5. So I'm guessing that if they need 13 to win, that the preferences are going to go to ALP. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how. From memory, the ACT, Australia's Capital Territory, is pretty left leaning. So there's probably a good chance that the any preferences would go towards that. But I don't know how proliferated the ACT is with minor parties and where their leanings go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, there's certainly looking towards an ACT Labor win at the moment. I'm guessing that the Greens' preferences will go to Labor, but that's just a guess. And they'll get that 13 win. But there's still 2 seats in doubt, Jake.
Yep. Exciting.
2 seats in doubt. Anyway, all right. So we will probably keep you updated on that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Don't hold your breath.
Is it interesting? I don't know. We'll see. I'm sorry to our Canberran listeners.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Shout out to our ACT listeners. All right. Jake, I think I've reached the end of the script.
I think you have.
I think we've done it.
I think we have. I think we scaled this mountain together.
We have.
Now,
Jake,
Williams shoes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. When our listeners have finished polishing and trying to figure out what size, getting an R.M. Williams shoe fitted is an event in itself. You really have to prep yourself for it.
Got to get the shoehorn out. Got to have your nice, shiny, patterned socks.
Yep. Get your Christmas socks out. Really throw them a curveball, I reckon. Yeah. When they've finished sizing themselves up for their new pair of Australian-made and owned R.M. Williams, Jake, what would you like them to do?
I would love it. I would love it if they could hit the subscribe button and rate and review. By rating and reviewing, you put us in front of the eyes of anybody who trawls through the various podcast aggregators. So we'd greatly appreciate that.
With the view that maybe one day, Jake, we'll be able to afford a pair of R.M. Williams ourselves.
Oh, yeah. Look, out of the show, yes.
Yeah, that's right. And if you'd love to share the love, you can do so by telling your friends, families, and foes to head to thepouchthepodcast.com where they can choose their favourite podcast player of choice. Jake, thanks for letting me have yesterday off.
Oh, look, you deserved it.
I did.
If there's anyone that deserves a Sunday off, it's the person that normally sends every bloody Sunday editing the show. So well done. I hope you enjoyed it.
Now I'm going to do it at 7 p.m. on a Monday.
I hope you enjoyed your birthday weekend away.
Yeah, the birthday weekend was wonderful. Fantastic. Can't promote the Hunter Valley enough. Head on down there, but you won't be able to get any accommodation anyway. So, find a camp spot. All right, Jake. Well, enjoy your Monday night. And I look forward to catching up with you again very, very soon.
Sounds great. Thank you, sir.
All right. See ya. Bye, everyone.